Firstly, I'd like to thank Rosa and the team for inviting us to contribute to this series of talks. We're very grateful for the opportunity to share our experience working with family photography today. This opening image is my big sister, Wendy. My mother took this photo in 1960. It is simply entitled Baby Leroy. I have no idea who Baby Leroy is, and I'll be returning to my mother's photographs later in this presentation. The Family Museum began in earnest in 2017. Established by myself and Rachel Maloney, the project is rooted in my collection of found family photographs and albums, which I've put together over a period of more than 30 years. The archive dates from the 1860s to the present and comprises around 40,000 photographs and 600 albums. I started my collection in the mid-1990s. I couldn't honestly tell you why I initially started to collect them, but I now know it was the intimate access to history that they provided. My initial interest was in their physicality. I was struck by the variety of photographic formats the amateurs used over the past century or more, and by the way in which so many photos were mounted in these albums with careful attention to detail. I noted the placement of decorative corners and handwritten captions which interested me. Not just for the information they conveyed, but also their calligraphy and often their poetry. I was struck by the role time plays in changing these objects. In the late 19th century, cameras became cheap and simple enough to tempt the amateur. The millions of photographs taken by amateurs over the last 130 years, which have been carefully curated into family albums, tucked inside negative wallets and pinned to fridge doors, tells the stories of all our lives. As my collection grew, I began to realise that these albums were not just gatherings of random images, but were consciously constructed narratives. And probably the most lucid document of most ordinary people's lives. I've begun to understand their historical importance. I've spent 30 years immersed in this archive, and I would like to talk to you about what I think I have learned. There is rarely any great artistic consideration in these images, any intellectual goal or intended meaning to grapple with. More often than not, the aesthetic and technical aspects of photography could not be further from the domestic photographer's mind. But the emotional investment in these images is immense, and the emotions woven into these family photographs are common to us all. In many ways, family photos are interchangeable. We can project ourselves onto them with ease. Over time, huge numbers of these photographs and albums have become separated from their original owners. The albums, originally intended solely for private consumption, only became readily available and on the open market in the latter decades of the 20th century, representing an exciting historical cache that can shed further light on our shared humanity. These personal or family images have also proved a rich scene to tap for artists and academics interested in the development and practice of photography. These family photographs and albums are important because they can inspire and inform us. They can be a child's first access to history. I remember my own mother sitting down with her family album and teaching her grandchildren about the fears and excitements of the Second World War. Through the interview series that our project runs, we have made contact with people around the world who are using family photographs and albums to connect with their local communities and bring light to personal stories and in historical details that would otherwise have remained obscured. For example, the Goa Familiar project, based in India, runs open calls for citizens of Goa to share their images and albums, as well as oral histories and other forms of ancestral memorabilia. Goa Familiar's aim is to produce different readings of local history and of the use of photography in India. In London, The Hackney Archives acquired a large number of family portraits taken by a popular local studio photographer, Ronald Gibson. They used this collection as the basis of reminiscence sessions with Hackney community groups. Many aspects of the social history of the area and its residents were brought to life through these meetings and discussions based around these photographs. There is much discussion as to how one should approach curating and exhibiting found family photographs. So I'd like to show you how the Family Museum has approached this. Our inaugural show, Auto Memento, shown at the Swindon Museum and Art Gallery in 2019, we presented an overview of the Family Museum archive alongside a collection of Edwardian sticky-back photos, all taken at a local studio. We invited the people of Swindon to come and find their relatives. The images were on display for 3 months, but no one came forward. Despite a lack of response, the gesture was important. Last year, we mounted an exhibition, Whitsuntides, a British bond with the sea, in a laundrette in East London. The display featured photographs of people standing up to their ankles in the sea, a frequently recurring scene documented in British family albums and a ritual known to many British families. Each photograph was mounted in a Bakelite frame from the 1950s, the type used by amateurs for making contact prints at home. Following this, we were offered a one-day show at the Art Workers Guild in London last May, displaying our extensive collection of tintype photographs. The show featured 100 tintypes representing the 100 years of the format's existence. Many of the visitors we spoke to had no knowledge of the tintype format or that it was once ubiquitous. To accompany this show, our first show in 2019, we also published the first edition of Famzine, a 28-page zine dedicated to family photography. Our intention with the zine was to create a channel of communication for the subject and share views and stories of others working in the field. Our first 3 editions featured articles by academics, family historians, photographic engineers, international archivists, artists and curators, revealing the breadth of activity and interest around vernacular family photography. Appropriately, zines are a publication of the people, often printed, photocopied, stapled together in the maker's home. They offer a creative, grassroots take on the subject, much like a family photo album. Cheap to manufacture and easy to transport, Famzine can be flown across the globe for pennies. We have one subscriber in Taiwan who we hope to collaborate with on a future edition. To support the project, the Family Museum started a business selling photographs and later vintage cameras and film. We sell at 2 markets in East London. There are 2 bins of loose pictures. They are on sale, 5 photos for £1. When people take an interest or buy these photos, I engage them in conversation about what it is that interests them most. Firstly, people often refer to identifying with them. In other words, their emotional accessibility. There is rarely anything shown in a family photograph that one cannot relate to in some way. It is also the mystery surrounding these anonymous images that piques people's curiosity. I wonder what happened to them is a common question. I get a lot of browsers, people who don't buy but just rummage through the bins. I notice they bring people great joy. But the prescribed settings of family photos can be fairly narrow, so these are familiar scenes. People genuinely coo and swoon over these photos as if it were their own family. They fill older people with an enlivening nostalgia. One man told me he uses them as an antidote to loneliness. Many artists buy them. One was using them in conjunction with AI, but most are collage artists, an extremely accessible art form that almost anyone can take up. On one occasion, 2 women came up to the stall, one looking in one bin of photographs, one in the other. These 2 women were strangers, but I noticed they had similar tattoos. When I asked about these tattoos, they both explained that they had family photographs tattooed on their arms. One design depicted the woman's mother, the other woman's tattoo was of her grandfather. Both women told me that this was not an original idea. I later discovered it is a current trend among tattoo artists. For example, Pigment Ninja, aka artist Alikan Gurgun, creates tattoos using the customer's chosen family image. We will be interviewing Alikan later in the year to find out more about his work and his clientele's motivation for choosing to create an indelible image on their body, a family album of sorts taken to extremes. These tattoos highlight to me just how unimportant the fidelity of the family photograph as an object is. The mere suggestion of the image, an outline and no facial features, provides no barrier to the owner's emotional access. As absorbing as fine art, though remaining almost entirely artless, family photographs goad us into thinking more deeply about how to approach a critique of them, and so too, the history of photography itself. The greatest significance of these images, for those who choose to study them, is perhaps to be found in their changing context. The rise of digital image making over the past 4 decades has cast a new light over printed film photographs. Digital photography and its ever-evolving syntax, particularly in the realm of social media, has prompted many to describe analogue photographs as real or authentic, in reaction to the perception of digital or AI-generated imagery as less easily verifiable or genuine. The tangible material paper images that were once organised in family albums are increasingly viewed as historical artefacts worthy of museum collections, academic research and archival projects. Photographic company Polaroid understands the profitability of this concept. In a recent advertising campaign, they chose to emphasise the serendipitous joy of the real in relation to the use of their cameras and film. Real life is beautifully imperfect. Real life is unpredictable. It's messy. It's colour you can't control. It's dots and unwanted marks. It's wild. Real life is beautiful as it is. Polaroid newsroom. In presenting family photographs through archival projects such as ours, we believe that context is vitally important and that we should remain vigilant of this as to how our family albums were originally created. So I'd now like to talk to you about a collection of family photos about which I know a great deal, my mother's. Throughout her life, my mother created 2 albums of photographs. Most of the images dated from the early 1960s to the 1990s. Though these were family albums, my mother considered them her sole property. They meant everything to her. On many occasions, I watched her relive her love for the people in these photographs. I believe this image was taken in the 1890s. One of the children is my maternal grandmother, but nobody in the family knows which one. My mother protected these albums with her life. I once decided to borrow these albums for an afternoon so that I could make colour photocopies of them. It's one of the most nerve-wracking things I have ever done. Had my mother found out that I'd taken these albums without her permission, which she would have never given, she would have made my life a misery. I got back from the copy shop, sweating, placed the albums back where they came from. The moment I sat down, relieved I'd got away with this transgression, my mother walked in the room, looked me in the eye and said, "What have you been up to?" She saw right through me. She may not have been sure what I had done, but she knew I'd been up to something. My mother and father were married in the mid-1940s. The child second from the right is my eldest brother, Tony, a war baby and my mother's first child. Through the first half of the 1960s, my parents fostered over 60 children. We all grew up in a town called Hinckley in the Midlands in the UK. Each child was with them for a different amount of time and for different reasons. Angela Babb, from Barbados, for instance, stayed for 6 months while her mother was finishing her nursing training. This is me and my kid brother, Jim, around 1965. My mother died in 2017, aged 93. After she had died, unbeknown to me, my sister had removed all of the photos from the two albums and piled them into a plastic shopping bag. My sister, Wendy, handed out the photos to the members of the family for whom she thought they would have the most meaning. This is an image of me again, this time with my second eldest brother, Paul, a semi-professional cyclist. How this photograph became so damaged is a mystery, but the damage highlights to me once again of what little importance the fidelity of the object is. The degradation in a family photograph as an object is no barrier to the emotion it can evoke. In fact, damage may even enhance the feeling of connection and nostalgia. After my mother died, among my mother's photos was this one on the left. No one in the family had ever seen it before. It is my mum when she was 17. The photo is taken by the father of her first child, Tony. She had kept it her entire life without showing it to anyone. My mother suffered progressive dementia for 7 years prior to her death. When I visited her, I would always see this photo here on the right, on her bedside table. I firstly assumed it must have some special sentimental value to her, but as I understood my mother's condition better, I realised it was there to remind her of who she was. Seemingly benign family snapshots can play powerful functions in our lives, whether in the analogue or digital format. They are intimate documents with no firm borders to the sentiments they can encapsulate. Few of the 21st century creators of these albums likely imagined that their images will ever be on public display or cast onto the open market into the vast sea of anonymity. The way in which we choose to discuss and present these photographs should be cognizant of this, in our opinion. This is my kid brother, Jim, shown earlier today. I received this image via email 4 weeks ago. I was surprised to receive it. My brother doesn't send me photographs. The night my father died, my mother was completely distraught. As Dad was taken away in the ambulance, Mum pulled me to one side and said, "If anything happens to me, please promise me you'll look after Jim." And naturally, I said yes. I was thrilled when I got this photo and realised immediately the one advantage that 21st century family photography has over its 20th century counterpart. When looking back at these old albums, they can fill us with the exquisite pain of happy memories. But to know that your loved ones are doing well in the here and now is an invaluable joy. Thank you.